On the morning of August 12, 2024, Jennifer Morgan's phone buzzed on her kitchen counter. She was pouring coffee, preparing for another day teaching 8th grade English at Lincoln Middle School in Portland. The notification seemed ordinary at first. Google Photos had sent an alert. 3 new photos added to album Oregon Summer 2011. Jennifer's hand froze. The mug slipped from her fingers, shattering against the tile floor. That album belonged to her daughter who had vanished 13 years ago. Casey Morgan had been 24 years old when she disappeared into the forests of Oregon. A freelance photographer with a gift for capturing the raw beauty of the Pacific Northwest, Casey had built a modest reputation documenting wildlife and landscapes for outdoor magazines. Her Instagram feed showed a young woman who seemed most alive when surrounded by ancient trees and mountain silence. In her final post, dated August 21, 2011, she had photographed her hiking backpack laid out on her apartment floor, tagged with a single hashtag, Chakgyo Solo Adventure. The trip was supposed to last 5 days. Casey had secured a permit for the Eagle Creek Trail, a challenging route through the Columbia River Gorge that wound past waterfalls and through dense Douglas fir forests. She had told her mother about the assignment, a commission from National Geographic Traveler to photograph a rare butterfly species found only in that specific ecosystem. The magazine had awarded her a $12,000 grant for the project. It was her breakthrough moment, the kind of opportunity that could launch a serious career. Before we begin the story, let us know in the comments which city you're watching from. We're really curious where you're tuning in from. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel and leave a rating. Jennifer had been proud. She had also been worried, the way mothers worry when their children venture into wilderness alone. But Casey had reassured her. She knew the trails. She had the right equipment. Her Canon EOS 60D camera was professional grade, her tent was weatherproof, and she carried a GPS device along with paper maps. Casey was meticulous about preparation. On August 22, 2011, at precisely 8:47 in the morning, Casey had arrived at the Trailhead registration station. The ranger on duty that day was Marcus Tate, a 29-year-old Forest Service employee who had worked the territory for 6 years. Marcus remembered Casey clearly. She had seemed excited, he would later tell investigators. She had double-checked her route on the map spread across the registration desk, asked about recent weather patterns, and mentioned her plan to camp near Tunnel Falls, a spectacular 50-meter cascade where the trail passed behind the falling water. Marcus had issued her permit. He had watched her adjust her backpack straps and head toward the trailhead, camera already in hand. She was the 4th hiker to register that morning. 2 hours later, at 10:20, Casey had sent her mother a text message. Signal weak, back on the 27th. It was the last communication anyone received from her. August 27th came and went. Jennifer tried calling. The phone went straight to voicemail. She told herself not to panic. Casey was an adult after all. Maybe she had extended her trip. Maybe she had met other hikers and decided to explore a different area. But by August 28th, maternal instinct overruled rationality. Jennifer called the Portland Police Department to report her daughter missing. The response was immediate. By August 29th, search and rescue teams had located Casey's vehicle, a silver Honda CR-V, still parked at the Eagle Creek Trailhead lot. The car was locked. Nothing appeared disturbed. Inside, investigators found Casey's wallet, containing her driver's license and credit cards. She had taken only cash on the trail, standard practice for backcountry hiking where cards were useless. On August 30, 2011, 40 volunteers joined professional search teams to comb the Eagle Creek Trail corridor. They brought K-9 units specially trained to detect human scent. Helicopters flew overhead, their thermal cameras scanning the dense canopy. Marcus Tate served as one of the guides, using his intimate knowledge of the terrain to direct searchers toward likely camping spots and water sources. On the 3rd day of searching, teams found something. Near Tunnel Falls, approximately 12 miles from the trailhead, they discovered evidence of a campsite. The ground showed compression marks consistent with a tent. A small circle of stones suggested someone had built a fire, though no ashes remained. Rain had swept through the area 2 days after Casey's last contact. But the tent itself was gone. So was the backpack, the sleeping bag, the camera equipment. Everything Casey had carried into the wilderness had vanished with her. One searcher, a volunteer named David Chen, noticed something else. A set of footprints near the campsite seemed odd. They were smaller than typical men's hiking boots, consistent with women's size 7, Casey's size according to her mother. But the prints led toward the stream, then simply stopped. It was as if Casey had walked to the water's edge and evaporated. Marcus Tate had suggested the search teams expand their perimeter upstream. His logic seemed sound. If Casey had fallen into the water, the current might have carried her body downstream initially, but debris often snagged in pools and eddies farther up the creek. The teams followed his advice. They found nothing. By September 5, 2011, the official search was called off. Casey Morgan was classified as a missing person, presumed lost in the wilderness. The assumption was grim but statistically common. A solo hiker had suffered an accident in remote terrain, and the forest had simply swallowed the evidence. It happened every year in the vast national forests of the Pacific Northwest. Sometimes bodies were found years later, miles from where anyone had searched. Sometimes they were never found at all. Jennifer refused to accept it. For 13 years, she maintained Casey's apartment exactly as her daughter had left it. She paid the rent from her teacher's salary, turning the small studio into a shrine of hope. Casey's clothes still hung in the closet. Her books lined the shelves. Her laptop sat on the desk, its battery long dead. Jennifer posted on social media every year on the anniversary of Casey's disappearance, sharing old photographs and pleading for information. She created a website called findcaseymorgan.org. She contacted psychics, private investigators, and amateur sleuths who claimed they could help. Nothing worked. The trail had gone cold. Then came the notification. Jennifer stood in her kitchen, staring at her phone screen, coffee pooling around the broken mug at her feet. Her hand shook as she opened the Google Photos app. The album Oregon Summer 2011 had been created by Casey before the trip. It contained 63 photos, images of Casey preparing for the hike, pictures of her gear, selfies taken at her apartment. Jennifer had looked at these photos thousands of times over the years, searching for clues she might have missed, memorizing every detail of her daughter's face. But now there were 3 new images. The first showed a waterfall. Not just any waterfall. Jennifer recognized it immediately from the search operation photos she had studied obsessively. Tunnel Falls. The water cascaded down dark basalt rock, surrounded by vibrant green moss and ferns. The photograph was beautifully composed, the kind of shot that demonstrated professional skill. Late afternoon light filtered through the mist, creating a soft glow. It was unmistakably Casey's work. The second image showed a close-up of moss growing on a boulder. The detail was extraordinary. Tiny water droplets clung to the fuzzy green surface, each one catching the light. The depth of field was shallow, the background blurred into abstract shapes of brown and green. This, too, bore Casey's artistic signature. She had always been fascinated by macro photography, finding grand beauty in small details. The third photograph made Jennifer's breath catch. It showed a figure on a trail. The person was distant, perhaps 70 or 80 meters away, walking away from the camera. The image was slightly out of focus, motion blurred, as if the photographer had snapped it quickly, without time to adjust settings. The figure wore dark clothing and carried a backpack. But the person's face was invisible, their identity impossible to determine. Jennifer sat down heavily on a kitchen chair, ignoring the coffee spreading across her floor. She checked the upload time. The photos had been added at 7:34 that morning. She checked the metadata. The images had been taken with a Canon EOS 60D, serial number matching Casey's camera. The date stamps on the files read August 23, 2011. But these photos had never been uploaded before. Jennifer knew Casey's photo collection intimately. These 3 images were new to the cloud, despite being 13 years old. Someone had Casey's camera. Someone had kept it all these years. And now, for reasons Jennifer couldn't fathom, that someone had decided to upload the photographs. She called 911 with trembling fingers. The dispatcher put her through to the Portland Police Department's Cold Case Division. Within an hour, Detective Sarah Chen arrived at Jennifer's house, a young investigator with sharp eyes and a reputation for solving impossible cases through meticulous digital forensics. Sarah examined Jennifer's phone, making notes. She asked permission to access Casey's Google account, which Jennifer had maintained, paying the storage fees even though the account had been dormant for over a decade. Sarah's fingers moved quickly across her laptop keyboard, pulling up technical information that meant nothing to Jennifer but everything to the investigation. The photos were uploaded from an IP address in Beaverton, Sarah said. That's about 12 miles from here, a public library on Canyon Road. Can you find out who used the computer? Jennifer asked. We'll get the security footage from the library, Sarah replied. But I need to tell you something, Mrs. Morgan. Whoever did this knows what they're doing. They used a VPN, a virtual private network that masks the true location. The Beaverton Library IP address might just be the exit point. The actual upload could have originated from anywhere. Jennifer felt cold despite the warm August morning. Why would someone do this? Why now? Sarah didn't have an answer. Instead, she focused on facts. She reopened Casey Morgan's case file, which hadn't been touched in 8 years. She contacted Marcus Tate, who was now senior ranger at Mount Hood National Forest. She tracked down Brad Collins. Brad Collins had been Casey's boyfriend, her ex-boyfriend technically. They had dated for 2 years before Casey broke up with him 3 months before her final hiking trip. Brad was 26 years old in 2011, working as a hiking guide for a company called Columbia River Gorge Adventures. He led tourist groups through the same wilderness areas where Casey loved to shoot photographs. When detectives contacted him in 2011, Brad had been cooperative. He had explained that the breakup had been difficult but mutual. Casey wanted more independence, he had said. She felt suffocated by his attention, by his need to always know where she was and what she was doing. Brad had admitted to struggling with the separation, but he insisted they had parted on good terms. He hoped they might reconcile eventually. More importantly, Brad had an alibi. From August 22 through August 27, 2011, he had been leading a 5-day guided expedition on Mount Hood, 50 miles from the Eagle Creek Trail. The tourist company confirmed his assignment. There were photographs of Brad with his group, time-stamped and geotagged. He couldn't have been in 2 places at once. Now, in 2024, Brad Collins was 39 years old. He was married with 2 children, still working in outdoor recreation. When Sarah Chen called him about the new photographs, Brad sounded genuinely shocked. "I don't understand," he said over the phone. "Casey's camera? After all this time?" "We're trying to determine who has access to her equipment," Sarah explained. "Did you ever have her passwords? Her cloud storage login?" "No," Brad said. "Casey was private about that stuff. She didn't even like me looking at her photos before she finished editing them." Sarah made a note. "Where were you this morning, Mr. Collins? Around 7:30? There was a pause. "At home. My wife can confirm that." "Why?" "Just routine questions," Sarah said. "We're talking to everyone who knew Casey." After hanging up, Sarah pulled Brad's old case file. Something bothered her about his alibi, though she couldn't articulate what. The Mount Hood expedition was well documented, but Sarah had learned to trust her instincts. She flagged Brad's name for follow-up. Meanwhile, Jennifer Morgan sat in her daughter's preserved apartment, surrounded by ghosts. She looked at Casey's camera bag, which had been at home during the fatal trip. Casey had taken a backup camera body on the hike. She looked at Casey's journals, filled with notes about photography techniques and observations about light. She looked at the bulletin board where Casey had pinned inspirational photos torn from magazines. One photo caught Jennifer's attention. It showed Tunnel Falls, the same waterfall from the newly uploaded image. Casey had pinned it there months before her final trip, marking it as a location she wanted to shoot. In the margin, Casey had written a note in her precise handwriting. Golden hour light, late August, position behind the cascade. Jennifer's phone buzzed again. Another Google Photos notification. Her heart hammered as she opened the app. 5 more images had appeared in the album. These were different. They showed the interior of a tent, taken at night. A camping lantern provided illumination, casting warm light on the nylon walls. In one photo, a sleeping bag was visible, partially unzipped. In another, camping gear was neatly arranged, a water bottle, a paperback book, a granola bar wrapper. And in the third new photo, Jennifer saw something that made her cry out. It was a photograph of Casey herself, taken from behind. Casey was sitting in the sleeping bag, her blonde hair pulled back in a ponytail, wearing a gray fleece jacket. She was writing in a notebook, unaware of the camera. Someone had been in Casey's tent. Someone had photographed her while she slept. Jennifer called Sarah Chen immediately. The detective arrived within 20 minutes, her laptop already open. She examined the new images with intense focus, extracting every scrap of metadata, every technical detail that might provide a clue. The timestamp on these photos is August 23, 2011, around 9 p.m., Sarah said. Same day as the waterfall shots, same camera. But Mrs. Morgan, these weren't taken by Casey. The angle is wrong. Someone else took these pictures. Who? Jennifer whispered. Who was with her? Sarah's expression was grim. That's what we need to find out, because whoever took these photos knows exactly what happened to your daughter. The Beaverton Public Library's security system had been upgraded in 2019, 3 years before the pandemic. The cameras covered every entrance, every computer station, every aisle between the shelves. When Sarah Chen arrived with a warrant on August 13, 2024, the head librarian pulled up the footage from the previous morning without hesitation. At 7:31 a.m. on August 12th, a man had entered through the main doors. He wore a baseball cap pulled low, sunglasses despite the early hour, and a dark jacket with the collar turned up. His face was invisible. He moved directly to Computer Station 7, signed in using a library card that turned out to be registered to a fake name, and spent exactly 8 minutes at the terminal before leaving. Sarah watched the footage 3 times, studying the man's build, his gait, the way he carried himself. He was approximately 6 feet tall, lean, athletic. He moved with purpose, no hesitation. This wasn't someone nervous about being caught. This was someone who had planned every detail. The computer's browsing history had been wiped. But the library's network logs told a different story. During those 8 minutes, someone had accessed Google Photos through a VPN connection, uploaded files from a USB drive, then disconnected. The VPN routed through servers in 3 different countries before emerging at the Beaverton Library's IP address. Professional-level operational security. Whoever this is, they have technical sophistication, Sarah told Jennifer during a meeting at the police station. This isn't some random person who stumbled across your daughter's camera. This is deliberate, calculated. Jennifer sat across from Sarah, her face pale with sleepless nights. But why? Why torture me like this? Sarah didn't answer immediately. She had seen many strange things during her career in cold cases, but this felt different. The psychological aspect was disturbing. Someone had held on to Casey Morgan's camera for 13 years, never selling it, never disposing of it. Instead, They had preserved the memory card with its 247 photographs intact. And now, for reasons Sarah couldn't yet understand, that person was slowly releasing the images. "We need to revisit everyone who knew Casey," Sarah said, starting with Brad Collins. Brad's alibi from 2011 seemed airtight on the surface. The Mount Hood expedition had been documented extensively. The Columbia River Gorge Adventures Company maintained detailed records, client lists, route plans, emergency contact procedures. Brad had been assigned as the lead guide for a group of 8 tourists from August 22nd through August 27th. But when Sarah requested the original documentation, she found something interesting. Brad's name appeared on the assignment sheet, but with an asterisk. The notation read, B. Collins, Backup Guide, F. Martinez Primary. Sarah called the company's current operations manager. What does backup guide mean? It means he was there if the primary guide needed assistance, the manager explained. On longer expeditions, we sometimes send 2 guides, but backup doesn't always stay with the group the whole time. They might handle camp setup while the primary guide is with clients. So Brad could have left the group? Technically, yes, if he coordinated with the primary guide, but we'd have a record if... The manager paused. Wait, I'm looking at the old logs. There's a notation here, August 23rd, 2011. Brad called in sick, stayed at base camp while the group summited. Sarah felt something click into place. He was at base camp alone? According to this, yes, just for that day. He rejoined the group on the 24th. Sarah hung up and pulled out a map. Mount Hood to Eagle Creek Trail, 90 minutes by car. Brad could have driven there, spent several hours, and returned before anyone noticed his absence. If he had left base camp at dawn and returned by evening, he would have had the entire day. But why would Brad follow Casey into the wilderness? They had broken up. He had claimed the separation was mutual, though Sarah's experience told her that breakups were rarely as clean as people pretended. She began digging into Brad's background more thoroughly. In 2010, a year before Casey's disappearance, a woman named Rachel Summers had filed a complaint with Columbia River Gorge Adventures. Rachel had been a client on one of Brad's guided hikes. In her statement, she described Brad as overly attentive and unwilling to respect boundaries. She said he had asked for her phone number multiple times, showed up at her hotel uninvited, and sent her dozens of text messages after the trip ended. The company had responded with a written warning in Brad's employee file, mandatory training on professional conduct, and a formal apology to Rachel. Sarah tracked down Rachel, who now lived in Seattle. Over the phone, Rachel remembered the incident clearly. He was charming at first, Rachel said. Really knowledgeable about the trails, good at his job. But when I didn't reciprocate his interest romantically, something changed. He became obsessed with knowing where I was going after the trip, who I was seeing, whether I had a boyfriend. It scared me enough that I filed the complaint. Did he ever threaten you? Not directly, but there was this moment on the last day of the hike. We were alone briefly while the rest of the group was photographing a vista. He got really close to me and said, "People think they can just walk away from me." It was the way he said it, like a warning. Sarah made detailed notes. Then she contacted Casey's friends, people who had known her during the relationship with Brad. A former roommate named Emily Chen described Brad as controlling. Casey loved him at first, Emily said, but it got suffocating. He needed to know where she was constantly. He'd show up places unannounced. When she told him she needed space, he'd send these long, emotional texts about how she was his whole world. It was intense. How did he react when she broke up with him? Badly. He kept calling her, showing up at her apartment. Casey had to threaten to get a restraining order. That seemed to work. He backed off. But she told me she felt like he was still watching her somehow. She said she'd see his truck in places she didn't expect, like he was following her but keeping his distance. Sarah pulled Brad's financial records from 2011. In November of that year, 3 months after Casey disappeared, Brad had made a significant purchase, a new Jeep Wrangler. The vehicle cost $32,000. He had put down $8,000 in cash as a deposit. Sarah checked his bank statements. Brad's salary at Columbia River Gorge Adventures had been $48,000 annually, about $4,000 per month before taxes. Where had he gotten $8,000 in cash? She cross-referenced with Casey's financial records. In July 2011, National Geographic Traveler had issued Casey a grant check for $12,000 for her photography project. The check had been deposited into Casey's account on July 18th. But on August 30th, 2011, 3 days after Casey's expected return date, 2 days after the search began, an ATM withdrawal of $8,000 had been made from Casey's account. The withdrawal location was in Gresham, Oregon, 20 minutes from the Eagle Creek trailhead. The transaction had been flagged at the time as potentially fraudulent, but with Casey missing and presumed dead in the wilderness, investigators had assumed someone had stolen her debit card. The case had gone nowhere because there were no cameras at that particular ATM, and the card had never been used again. But now Sarah wondered, what if someone who knew Casey's PIN had made that withdrawal? What if Brad had convinced Casey to share her banking information during their relationship the way couples sometimes did? Sarah brought Brad in for another interview. He arrived with his wife, Melissa, who sat beside him in the interrogation room, looking confused and worried. "Mr. Collins, I need to ask you about your finances in 2011, Sarah began. Brad's expression shifted slightly. "That was 13 years ago. You purchased a Jeep in November 2011, $8,000 down payment in cash. Where did that money come from?" "I'd been saving," Brad said. "I lived cheaply, didn't have many expenses." "Your bank statements don't show $8,000 in savings at that time." Brad glanced at his wife, then back to Sarah. "I kept some cash at home. I didn't trust banks much back then." "That's convenient," Sarah said, because 3 days after Casey went missing, $8,000 was withdrawn from her account. Brad's face went pale. "You think I didn't touch her money. I didn't even know she had that grant money." "Really? Because Casey's friend Emily says you were very interested in her career developments, very interested in knowing her plans." Melissa Collins spoke up. "Detective, my husband is not a thief, and he certainly didn't hurt Casey. He was devastated when she disappeared." Sarah turned to Melissa. "How long have you known your husband, Mrs. Collins?" "We met in 2015. We've been married for 7 years." "So you didn't know him when Casey disappeared?" Melissa hesitated. "No, but Brad has always been honest with me about his past. He told me about Casey, about how guilty he felt that he couldn't help find her." Sarah pushed a folder across the table. It contained printouts of the newly uploaded photographs. "These images appeared in Casey's cloud storage last week. Someone uploaded them from a public library using sophisticated methods to hide their identity. Someone who has had Casey's camera for 13 years. Brad looked at the photos. His hands trembled slightly. "I don't understand. Are you accusing me of having her camera?" "I'm asking if you have access to her belongings." "No, God, no. I don't." Brad's voice cracked. "Look, I know how this appears. I know I wasn't always healthy in that relationship, but I would never hurt Casey. She broke my heart, but I didn't." He looked at his wife, then at Sarah. "I want to help. What do you need from me?" "I need you to consent to a search of your home and vehicles." Melissa started to object, but Brad cut her off. "Fine. Search whatever you want. You won't find anything because I didn't do this." The search took place 2 days later. Police went through Brad's house in Troutdale, the garage where he kept his current vehicle and hiking equipment, and a storage unit he rented in Gresham. They found nothing, no camera, no memory cards, no evidence connecting Brad to Casey's disappearance. But Sarah wasn't satisfied. She reviewed the GPS data from Brad's old Garmin watch, which he had submitted during the original 2011 investigation. The watch tracked elevation, distance, and location. According to the data, Brad had been on Mount Hood continuously from August 22nd through August 27th. Sarah sent the data file to a digital forensics expert at Portland State University. Dr. Kenneth Park examined the file structure and called Sarah 3 days later. "This is interesting," Dr. Park said. "The GPS data looks legitimate on the surface, but there's something odd about the timestamps. See, Garmin watches record data in continuous streams, but this file has a gap." "What kind of gap?" "About 18 hours on August 23rd. The data just stops, then resumes. It's like the watch was turned off, then turned back on." "Could that happen naturally? Battery dying?" "Possible, but when a Garmin dies from low battery, it usually shows a gradual degradation in recording frequency. This is a clean cutoff, then a clean restart, more consistent with someone manually powering off the device." Sarah felt the case shifting. "Or someone removing the watch." "Exactly. If Brad took off the watch and left it at base camp while he drove somewhere else, the GPS would still show him on Mount Hood. It's not proof of anything, but it raises questions." Sarah decided to focus on Marcus Tate next. The ranger had been helpful during the original search, perhaps too helpful. She pulled his complete file from the Forest Service. Marcus had worked for the Oregon National Forest System since 2005. His record was exemplary. Multiple commendations for search and rescue operations, excellent performance reviews, popular with both colleagues and the public. But there was one blemish. In 2007, a woman named Linda Barnes had filed a complaint against Marcus. Linda had been hiking alone on the Pacific Crest Trail when Marcus encountered her at a remote checkpoint. According to Linda's statement, Marcus had been inappropriately personal, asking about her relationship status, whether she was meeting anyone on the trail, whether she felt safe alone with strangers. When Linda had politely deflected, Marcus had given her his personal cell phone number, written on the back of a Forest Service business card. He had called it emergency contact information, but Linda felt uncomfortable enough to report it. The investigation had gone nowhere. Marcus's supervisor had given him a verbal warning about maintaining professional boundaries, and the incident was noted in his file, but not pursued further. Linda Barnes had completed her hike without further contact from Marcus and hadn't pressed charges. Sarah tracked down Linda, who was now living in Colorado. Over the phone, Linda's memory of the incident was vivid. "I remember feeling watched," Linda said. "Like he was memorizing my face, my route, everything about me. And the questions, they weren't normal ranger safety questions. He wanted to know if I had a boyfriend, if my boyfriend knew where I was, whether anyone would miss me if I didn't check in." It felt predatory. "Did he follow you after that encounter?" "I don't know. I spent the rest of that section of trail looking over my shoulder. Maybe I was paranoid, but something about him felt wrong." Sarah interviewed other female hikers who had encountered Marcus over the years. Most described him as professional and helpful, but 3 women mentioned feeling uncomfortable with his attention, the way he would ask personal questions, the intensity of his gaze, the way he seemed to remember details about them if they encountered him again on different trails. None of it was criminal, but it painted a picture of someone with boundary issues, someone who paid too much attention to women hiking alone. Sarah obtained a warrant to search Marcus's home in Sandy, Oregon. The house was neat, organized, almost sterile in its tidiness. Marcus lived alone, never married, no children. His living room was decorated with maps of Oregon's wilderness areas, each map marked with pins and handwritten notes. Sarah studied the maps. Many of the pins marked successful search and rescue operations, locations where Marcus had helped find lost hikers. But 7 pins were different. They were marked in red rather than blue, and next to each one, Marcus had written a name and date. Casey Morgan, August 2011, Eagle Creek Trail. Amanda Rodriguez, June 2007, Timothy Lake. Patricia Chen, September 2013, Mount Jefferson. The list went on. 7 names, 7 women who had disappeared in Oregon wilderness areas over 15 years. 7 cold cases that had never been solved. Sarah called in the forensic team. In Marcus's garage, they found a filing cabinet containing folders for each of the 7 cases. The folders were meticulously organized: newspaper clippings, printed police reports, photographs from search operations, topographical maps marked with search grids. Marcus arrived home while the search was ongoing. He didn't resist, didn't demand to see a warrant. He simply stood in his driveway, watching police carry boxes from his house. "I study them," Marcus said when Sarah confronted him. "Every person who doesn't come back, I study the case. I'm trying to understand patterns. Why do people vanish? What are the common factors? If I can identify patterns, maybe I can prevent future tragedies." "This looks like an obsession, Mr. Tate." "It's not obsession. It's responsibility." Marcus's voice was calm, controlled. "I'm the one who sees them last. I'm the one who gives them permission to enter the wilderness. When they don't return, that's on me." "Did you study Casey Morgan while she was alive?" Marcus met Sarah's eyes. "I gave her a trail permit. I wished her a safe trip. That's all." "You directed the search teams to look upstream from her campsite. Why?" "Because it made logical sense. Water currents, terrain features, statistical probability of where someone in distress would go." "Or because you knew where to look?" Marcus's expression hardened. "Detective, I have spent 13 years trying to find answers about Casey Morgan and 6 other women. I have done nothing wrong. My collection of case files is research, not evidence of guilt." The forensic team found something else in Marcus's garage, a sealed plastic container on a high shelf, hidden behind camping equipment. Inside the container were hiking socks, women's size 7, still damp when they had been sealed away. DNA analysis took 3 days. The results came back positive. The socks belonged to Casey Morgan. Sarah arrested Marcus Tate on September 1, 2024. He declined a lawyer, insisting he wanted to explain. "I found those socks during the search in 2011, Marcus said in the interrogation room. "They were by the stream, caught on some rocks. I bagged them as potential evidence, but then I forgot to submit them. By the time I remembered, weeks had passed, and I was afraid I'd get in trouble for contaminating the chain of custody. So I kept them." "You kept evidence from a missing person case for 13 years? "I know how it looks, but I swear, I found them during the official search. I didn't hurt Casey. I've been trying to help her family find closure." Sarah laid out the timeline. "You were the last person to see Casey alive at the registration station. You directed search teams away from promising areas. You kept physical evidence from her disappearance, and you've been tracking 7 other missing women. How is that helping, Mr. Tate?" Marcus leaned forward. "Because I couldn't save them, any of them, and it haunts me every single day." The case against Marcus seemed strong. The district attorney began preparing charges, obstruction of justice at minimum, possibly more depending on what additional evidence emerged. But then, on September 12, 2024, a third upload of photographs appeared in Casey Morgan's cloud storage. This time, there were 12 new images, and they changed everything. The photos showed a sequence of events: Casey setting up her tent, Casey filtering water from the stream, Casey eating a freeze-dried meal, and then, in the later photos, a man sitting across from Casey at her campsite. The images were taken from Casey's camera, positioned on a tripod or rock, self-portraits with a timer function. The man's face was clearly visible. He was young, lean, athletic. He was smiling. Casey was smiling too, relaxed, comfortable with his presence. The man was Brad Collins. Sarah compared the photos to Brad's 2011 driver's license image. No question. Brad had been at Casey's campsite on the evening of August 23, 2011. His alibi about being on Mount Hood was a lie. And now someone was proving it by releasing these photographs 13 years later. The next photo in the sequence showed Brad and Casey sitting closer together, talking. Then Brad standing up, gesturing toward the forest. Then Casey looking away, her expression suddenly tense. The final photo was taken from inside the tent, looking out. The camera angle was low, as if the camera had been dropped or placed on the ground. Through the tent's mesh window, a blurred figure was visible outside, illuminated by campfire light. The timestamp on that final image was 11:47 p.m., August 23, 2011. Sarah issued a warrant for Brad Collins's arrest. But when officers arrived at his home in Troutdale, Brad was gone. His wife, Melissa, was hysterical. "He left yesterday. He said he had to check something for work. He took his truck, and he hasn't come back. He's not answering his phone." Sarah put out an APB for Brad's vehicle, a blue Toyota Tacoma. She also issued an alert to law enforcement agencies across Oregon and Washington. Brad Collins was now officially a fugitive. But Sarah had another question. If Brad had killed Casey in 2011 and taken her camera, why would he upload these self-incriminating photos now? Why expose himself? The answer came from an unexpected source. Dr. Park, the digital forensics expert, called Sarah with new information about the photo uploads. "I analyzed the upload patterns," Dr. Park said. 3 separate uploads over 4 weeks, each upload from a different location, Beaverton, Salem, and Bend. But here's what's interesting. The VPN configuration is identical across all 3. Same software, same server routing, same encryption protocol. That suggests the same person is doing all the uploads. Brad? Maybe, but there's something else. I pulled data from the original memory card image, the 247 photos that were on Casey's camera in 2011. Someone has been accessing those files regularly over the past 13 years. Not uploading them, just opening them, viewing them. How can you tell? File access timestamps. Every time you open a digital photo, the file system records it. These photos have been opened thousands of times, like someone was looking at them over and over. Sarah felt a chill. Who looks at photos of their victim thousands of times? Someone obsessed, Dr. Park said. Someone who can't let go. Brad Collins's truck was found on September 15, 2024, abandoned in a Walmart parking lot in Eugene, Oregon, 110 miles south of Portland. The vehicle was locked, empty, showing no signs of struggle. Surveillance footage from the store showed Brad parking at 3:47 a.m. 3 days earlier, walking toward the highway with a backpack and disappearing into the darkness. He hadn't used his credit cards. His phone was turned off. He had vanished as completely as Casey had 13 years before. Sarah Chen stood in the parking lot watching forensic technicians process Brad's truck. Something about this felt wrong. If Brad had killed Casey and kept her camera as some kind of trophy, why run now? Why not simply deny everything and lawyer up? The photos proved he had lied about his alibi, but they didn't prove murder. A decent attorney could argue that Brad had visited Casey's campsite, they had talked, and he had left her alive. Without a body, without a weapon, without forensic evidence of violence, conviction would be difficult. Unless Brad was running because there was more evidence. Evidence he knew would surface. Sarah's phone rang. It was Jennifer Morgan. "Detective, I got an email." Jennifer's voice was shaking. "From Casey's account." Sarah's pulse quickened. "What does it say?" "It's an address, just an address in Salem. Nothing else." Salem, the city where Casey's silver Pandora bracelet had been sold to a pawn shop 10 months earlier. The city where the second batch of photos had been uploaded. Sarah got in her car and drove south, lights flashing, pushing 80 miles per hour on Interstate 5. The address led to a storage facility on the outskirts of Salem, Secure Storage Solutions, a sprawling complex of orange metal units behind chain-link fencing. Sarah arrived with 2 patrol cars as backup. The facility manager, a man named Ron Kelsey, checked his records. Unit 247 is rented to a Brad Collins, Ron said. Paid up through the end of the year. He's had it since December 2011. December 2011, 4 months after Casey disappeared. Ron unlocked the unit and rolled up the door. The space was 10 feet by 10 feet, climate-controlled, dimly lit by a bare bulb. Inside, stacked carefully against the walls, were clear plastic storage bins. Dozens of them. Sarah pulled on latex gloves and opened the first bin. Inside were women's hiking clothes, neatly folded. A purple rain jacket, black synthetic pants, wool socks, a gray fleece pullover. Sarah recognized the fleece from Casey's Instagram photos. The second bin contained camping equipment, a tent still in its stuff sack, a sleeping bag compressed into a storage bag, a portable stove, water filtration system, all the gear Casey had carried into the wilderness. The third bin held personal items, a journal with Casey's handwriting, entries about photography and light and the beauty of solitude, a worn paperback copy of Desert Solitaire by Edward Abbey, a small bag of toiletries, a silver Pandora bracelet with 3 charms, compass, mountain, camera. Brad had kept everything. He had created a shrine to Casey Morgan, preserved in plastic, locked away in climate-controlled darkness for 13 years. The fourth bin contained electronics, a Canon EOS 60D camera body, battery removed, lens detached, a laptop in a protective case, a portable hard drive, USB cables, memory cards in labeled cases, and a small digital voice recorder. Sarah picked up the voice recorder carefully. It was an Olympus model from 2010, professional quality, the kind journalists and students used. The LED indicator showed charge remaining in the battery. Sarah pressed play. Casey's voice filled the storage unit. August 22nd evening, made camp about 12 miles in, near Tunnel Falls. The light this afternoon was perfect, got some really beautiful shots of the Cascade with late sun coming through the mist. Tomorrow I'll try to catch dawnlight, then push farther up the trail to where the butterfly species has been spotted. A pause, the sound of a camping stove hissing. Then Casey's voice again. Saw something weird today. I think Brad's truck was at the trailhead parking lot when I left. Blue Tacoma, same bumper sticker. But that doesn't make sense. He's supposed to be on Mount Hood with clients. Maybe I'm being paranoid. Maybe it just looked like his truck. Sarah felt ice in her stomach. She fast-forwarded. August 23rd morning, hiked out to the butterfly habitat. Got some incredible macro shots. I think National Geographic is going to love these. Heading back to camp now to upload my favorites to cloud storage before the battery dies. Signal is weak, but I found 1 bar near the ridge. Fast forward again. August 23rd, evening. Something happened. Brad showed up at my campsite an hour ago. I don't know how he found me. He said he left his group, said he needed to talk to me, said we made a mistake breaking up. I told him to leave. He won't leave. Casey's voice had changed. The relaxed tone was gone, replaced by tension. Sarah could hear fear creeping in. He's acting strange, asking about the grant money, about my plans after this trip. He wants me to give him another chance. He said he's been following my Instagram, my location tags, watching where I go. He said he knows I went on a date with someone last month. How does he know that? I didn't post anything about it. A longer pause. Background noise, crickets, a stream, the rustle of wind in trees. I'm scared. He's sitting by the fire, and he won't stop staring at me. He keeps saying we belong together, that I'm making a mistake choosing my career over him. I told him the career isn't why we broke up. It's because he's controlling, because he makes me feel trapped. He didn't like that. His whole face changed. Sarah's hands were shaking. She wanted to reach through time, to warn Casey, to tell her to run. He's asking about my bank account, about the grant money. He says if I loved him, I'd help him out financially. He says he's got debts, needs to make a big purchase. I said no. I said the money is for my work. He got angry, really angry, started yelling about how I think I'm better than him, how I'm selfish, how I use people and throw them away. The recording crackled. Movement sounds like the recorder being picked up. I'm going to try to get to my car. It's 12 miles, but I can hike through the night if I have to. I'm going to pack up quietly and... Brad's voice cut in, loud and close to the microphone. What are you doing? Are you recording this? Give me that. Sounds of struggle. Casey's voice. Brad, stop. You're making me look crazy, recording me like I'm some kind of criminal. I just wanted to talk. You followed me into the wilderness? That's not normal? Because you won't listen. Because you keep pushing me away. More struggle. Something hitting the ground. Probably the recorder. The audio became muffled, distant, voices arguing but words unclear. Then a sound that made Sarah close her eyes. Casey screaming. Not words, just a scream of fear and pain. Then silence. After 30 seconds of nothing, Brad's voice came back, breathing hard, close to the microphone again. Oh God. Casey? Casey, I didn't mean... Casey, please. Please wake up. Sounds of crying. Brad crying. What did I do? What did I do? More silence. Then Brad's voice, calmer now, frightening in its calmness. Okay. Think. Nobody knows I'm here. My watch is at base camp. My group thinks I'm sick. Nobody saw my truck. I can fix this. I can make this look like an accident. Rustling sounds. Items being moved. Brad talking to himself. Take the camera. Worth money. Take the laptop. Check the tent for anything with my name. The grant check. She has it in her pack. Her pin is her birthday. She told me that once. I can get the money out. Say I'm her boyfriend. Say she asked me to... The recording continued for another 6 minutes. Brad methodically going through Casey's belongings, taking anything valuable, anything that might identify him. Then the sound of dragging, Brad breathing heavily with exertion. The recorder captured his voice one final time. The creek, water will take care of everything, and if they search, they'll never look this far downstream. I'm sorry, Casey. I loved you. You made me do this. Then the recording stopped. Sarah stood in the storage unit, the voice recorder still in her hand. Around her, patrol officers stood silent, having heard everything. One of them, a young officer named Martinez, looked pale. He recorded his own confession, Martinez said. Sarah shook her head. He didn't know Casey's voice recorder was running. She must have dropped it when he attacked her. It rolled under something, kept recording. Brad never found it when he was cleaning up the scene. But why would he keep it? Why keep all of this? That was the question. Sarah went through the storage bins more carefully. At the bottom of the bin containing electronics, she found a shoebox. Inside were printed photographs, not Casey's professional work, but personal snapshots. Brad and Casey together, happy, arms around each other. Vacation photos, birthday celebrations, the pictorial history of a relationship. And underneath the photos, a letter, handwritten on notebook paper, dated December 15th, 2011. Sarah recognized the handwriting from Casey's journal. But this wasn't Casey's handwriting. This was Brad's. The letter was addressed to Casey. I didn't mean for it to happen this way. I loved you. I still love you. I came to the trail to convince you to give us another chance, but you wouldn't listen. You kept saying I was controlling, suffocating, obsessive. You didn't understand that everything I did was because I loved you. When you said you could never love me again, something broke inside me. I grabbed you. I just wanted you to stop talking, to stop saying those horrible things. But then you fell. You hit your head on the rock by the fire pit, and you stopped moving. I tried to help you. I tried CPR. But you were gone. I panicked. I took your things. I took your camera because I wanted to keep your photos, to remember you. I took the money because I needed it, and you didn't anymore. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. But I can't bring you back, and I can't go to prison. So I'm going to keep you here, in this storage unit. Your things, your voice, your photos. You'll always be with me this way. You'll never leave me again. Sarah photographed the letter, then bagged it as evidence. The psychological profile was clear now. Brad hadn't kept Casey's belongings as trophies of violence. He had kept them as a shrine to the relationship he couldn't accept was over. He had visited this storage unit regularly. The facility logs showed him checking in every 2 to 3 weeks for 13 years. He came here to be with Casey's memory, to look at her photos, to read her journal, to maintain the delusion that somehow she was still his. But that didn't explain the uploads to cloud storage. That didn't explain the photos appearing weeks ago, triggering the reopened investigation. Sarah found the answer in the final storage bin. Inside was a newer laptop, a 2023 MacBook Pro, and a notebook filled with dates, IP addresses, and technical notes. The notes were in Brad's handwriting. August 12, 2024. Uploaded waterfall photos from Beaverton Library. Used NordVPN. Cleared cookies. If they find Casey's things, I need them to think someone else has been stalking the family. August 19, 2024. Uploaded tent photos from Salem Library. Used same VPN server. Building narrative of anonymous stalker. August 23, 2024. Final upload from Bend. Photos with my face. This will make them think I'm guilty. But they can't prove murder without a body. And they'll never find her. Sarah read the notes twice, understanding slowly dawning. Brad had uploaded the photos himself. He had deliberately incriminated himself. But why? The final entry in the notebook was dated September 10, 2024, 2 days before Brad disappeared. Melissa found the storage unit key. She asked what it was for. I told her it was old camping gear, but she's suspicious. She's been acting different, asking questions about my past. She's going to look. She's going to find everything. I need to create a distraction. If the police think I'm on the run, they'll focus on catching me. They'll stop investigating. Melissa will be safe from knowing the truth. Mom will be safe from knowing what I did. Better they think I'm a fugitive than know I'm a killer who kept his victims' belongings like a sick collection. Sarah closed the notebook. Brad wasn't running. He was hiding. Or he was planning something worse. She called the state police, FBI field office, and U.S. Marshals Service. She sent Brad's photo to every law enforcement agency in the Pacific Northwest. She issued a warning. Brad Collins should be considered dangerous, possibly suicidal. But they didn't need to search for long. On September 18, 2024, a hiker found a body at the base of Multnomah Falls, 30 miles east of Portland. The man had fallen 620 feet from the upper viewing platform. His identification, left carefully on the railing above, showed he was Brad Collins. Next to the ID was a handwritten note protected in a plastic bag. I can't live with what I did. Casey's body is in Eagle Creek, 2 miles downstream from Tunnel Falls, under the collapsed bank on the south side. I weighted her down with rocks. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Search teams found Casey Morgan's remains exactly where Brad had described. After 13 years in cold water, protected by the rock overhang and silt, enough was preserved for identification through dental records. The cause of death was blunt force trauma to the skull, consistent with Brad's confession. Jennifer Morgan stood by the creek when they brought her daughter out of the water. She didn't cry. She had used up all her tears over 13 years. She just stood there, silent, as the medical examiner's team did their work with quiet respect. Later, in Sarah Chen's office, Jennifer asked the question that had no good answer. Why did he keep her things? Why not just throw everything away? Sarah had thought about this. Because in his mind, keeping her belongings meant keeping her. He couldn't accept that she had left him, so he found a way to make her stay. The storage unit was his version of the relationship continuing. He visited regularly, looked at her photos, read her words. To him, it wasn't a crime scene. It was a memorial. But then he exposed himself. He uploaded the photos that led you to all of it. Why? Guilt, Sarah said. 13 years of carrying that secret. His wife getting suspicious. The pressure building. Part of him wanted to be caught. Part of him wanted the world to know what Casey experienced, to see her work, to understand she was real and talented and her loss mattered. And part of him wanted to punish himself. Jennifer nodded slowly. Do I get her camera back? Her photos? Eventually, after the trial concludes. Sarah stopped. There wouldn't be a trial. Brad was dead. Yes, you'll get everything back. The case officially closed on November 3, 2024. The district attorney issued a posthumous determination of guilt for Brad Collins in the death of Casey Morgan. The storage unit contents were released to Jennifer Morgan, who donated Casey's photography equipment to a scholarship fund for young women pursuing nature photography. Marcus Tate was cleared of all charges and received a formal apology. The socks found in his garage had been exactly what he claimed, forgotten evidence from the original search. His collection of missing persons cases was recognized as the obsessive research of someone who took his job too seriously, not the trophies of a criminal. The Pandora bracelet was returned to Jennifer. She wore it every day. Sarah Chen kept working cold cases, but Casey Morgan's investigation haunted her differently than the others. Because in the end, the evidence had been preserved perfectly, stored in climate-controlled darkness, visited regularly by the killer who couldn't let go. Brad Collins had created the most complete murder file she had ever seen, documented his own guilt in meticulous detail, and then fled not from justice, but from the unbearable weight of his own actions. Casey's photographs were published posthumously in National Geographic. The butterfly photos she died taking were extraordinary. Delicate wings caught in golden light. Nature's beauty preserved by a woman who loved wild places more than she feared being alone in them. The magazine dedicated the entire feature to her memory. On August 22, 2025, Jennifer Morgan hiked the Eagle Creek Trail for the first time. She carried Casey's camera, restored to working condition. At Tunnel Falls, where Casey had made her final camp, Jennifer set up the tripod and photographed the cascade exactly as her daughter had seen it. Late afternoon light filtering through mist, water dancing over ancient stone, the forest holding its secrets in shadow and green. She didn't stay long. Some places are too heavy with memory. But she left a small marker, unofficial and temporary, that said simply, Casey Morgan, photographer, August 1987, August 2011. She came here to capture beauty. She found it. 3 months later, the marker was gone, swept away by autumn rains and the indifferent passage of seasons. But the photographs remained, published and preserved, Casey's vision of light and wilderness and the delicate architecture of butterfly wings immortalized in the pages of a magazine that reached millions. It wasn't justice exactly. It wasn't healing. But it was something, a record that Casey Morgan had existed, had created, had seen beauty that others missed. And that somewhere in the dark space between obsession and love, between preservation and possession, her killer had ensured that her final work survived even when she could not. The trail reopened for hikers. The creek continued flowing. And in a house in Portland, Jennifer Morgan kept her daughter's room exactly as it had been, no longer a shrine to hope, but a museum of memory, knowing finally where Casey was and why she never came home.